Hi, my name is Amy, and I am a counselor here at the Crime Victim Center of Fayette County. Today, I have a special guest, Candace. She is from the Centerville Clinic in Washington County, and she is a behavioral and mental health supervisor and specialist there. With this being Sexual Assault Awareness Month, as well as Autism Acceptance Month, I thought it would be a good idea to have a little conversation about what sexual assault awareness means to those on the autism spectrum. So to start us off, Candace, would you like to give us a little overview of what autism is?
Absolutely. Amy, thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to
You're
be able
welcome.
to talk. I just want to talk to people about autism and how that might look, when a child who is autistic is sexually abused. So autism is a developmental disability that affects the areas of social interaction, communication skills, and cognitive function. At some point, for some of these kiddos, those skills may be delayed. And for some of those kids, unfortunately, those skills never develop to their full potential. A lot of children with autism can be nonverbal, where they're not able to speak at all. Some may be able to speak at some point and then maybe lose words and regress with communication delays. It is noted that autism typically is 4 times more often in boys than it is in girls. And the rates at which children who have autism have been sexually abused is about 7 times more likely than a neurotypical child. So this is very prevalent to them.
Yes, I've seen similar research to that, and it seems that these children are targeted because of their lack of communication skills, and maybe the fact that they don't pick up on all of the social cues and nuances that neurotypical folks do. Would you say that that might be true?
Yeah, so typically people who sexually assault anybody, they go for people that are easy prey based off of their own desires, somebody that they know. And unfortunately, with their delays in social skills and, communication skills, children with, any kind of intellectual disability as well as autism are just a very easy target because they hit all 3 of those.
Right. So that's why I think maybe the parents and caregivers of those children on the spectrum, maybe they really do need to address and having conversations with their children about self-protection, about body autonomy, learning the correct anatomical names for their body parts, and maybe just not assume that because their children are on the spectrum that they will simply be an asexual being. Do you think that that would be a good place to start the conversation?
Well, I mean, here's the deal. They're autistic. That doesn't mean they don't have sexual desires.
Right.
And of course, as parents, it's very uncomfortable for us to talk about in general.
Absolutely.
But by taking a lead with that, we are able to control what information they get and how they're learning it.
Exactly.
We have to kind of put ourselves as parents in uncomfortable positions so that our children thrive, and giving them the knowledge and tools to understand what sex is, what is okay sexually, when to have sex, when not to have sex, inappropriate touching, things like that is just so important. Tip 1 would just be take a deep breath yourself as a parent, understand what you're going to teach them. And there are tools out there that are helpful for you as a parent to present these ideas and things to your child.
Right. And I think it's so important that the conversation does begin at home, because like you said, then that parent can control the narrative and they can control the information that their child is receiving. And it can also empower their child to understand that it's their body and nobody has the right to touch them or make them feel uncomfortable in any way. And I like the fact also that you brought up that most of the time these forms of abuse occur with somebody that the family or child already knows. So that's really something that you have to look out for, because some of our folks on the spectrum take things so literal, and they really think that people are there solely to protect them and they're on their side. And that's why I think sometimes they might be easily lured into the grooming process and they just want to be accepted.
I was just going to mention, you know, a lot of kids on the spectrum, due to their, you know, poor social skills, children, whether you have autism or you're neurotypical, they all are socially awkward. Everybody's trying to make a friend. So then delay that a little bit. Now this child will do anything to have a friend. So think about, now this is somebody I trust. This is somebody I know. Surely they're not going to do something that hurts me.
Right.
Their natural instinct is to trust that person because they've been around them. So it really does put them at a disadvantage if they don't know what's appropriate and what is not.
Right. Exactly. And I think also as the child grows up into teen years, they very well might want to date. And like you said, well, I know this person. I think they care about me. I just want to make them happy. They wouldn't do anything to hurt me. And I don't think that parents are really prepared for that either, that their neurodivergent child might want to go out on a date. And it's totally normal. And it is part of the development.
Right. And I mean, no fault to any parents. We all want to protect our child.
Absolutely.
We all worry for those times when they date, and especially when you have a child who, you know, has higher needs than somebody else, you worry even more. But it is finding the ability to let them go, let them live their lives, and know that you have taught them and given them the best tools for success.
Exactly.
And that's really starting by having discussions. What if your child is nonverbal? There are texts and there are visual social stories that can introduce these concepts to your child.
Yes. I'm glad you brought those alternative forms of communication up, because a lot of times it is difficult for the person on the spectrum with maybe some communication delays to disclose and be what has happened to them, or they might not understand that what is actually abuse and what's not. So caregivers and parents really got to advocate for these kids, and they got to know who they're around all the time. And that is really important. And I think that's another reason that sometimes folks on the spectrum are targeted, because they're not going to tell. They won't be believed. Something like that.
Right. Well, I mean, the other thing is, you know, they don't get the social cues. They don't get the facial expression. So when somebody says, well, I'm not going to hurt you, to them, that's what that means.
Right.
Going on from that, even, you know, a lot of these kiddos, they struggle with the idea of self-stimulatory behaviors, which they use as a skill. You know, they need to calm themselves down. So for them, that might be their way of expressing it. But to us as adults, we may not understand what they're saying. So just by knowing who is around your child, who and where your child goes and sees. I mean, those are all key things to protect your child from, potentially abuse.
Exactly. I wanted to go a little bit into what can happen if indeed a child on the spectrum is sexually abused. Typically, there is something called a forensic interview that a child has to go through. It's just part of the legalities after abuse is suspected. A lot of times these kiddos, due to their difference in communication skills, might not disclose something that has happened. So it would be important for forensic interviewers to use the different types of communication, visual cues, pegboards, dry erase boards, something like that would be of a great deal of assistance. Also, if the child does disclose and the abuse is founded, there's not a lot of research and information on the best practice of how to deal with trauma and children and adults on the spectrum. Do you think that that's true? We're just kind of doing trial and error?
That's very much true. I mean, unfortunately, in this moment, there has not even been a lot of research conducted on sexual abuse and children with autism, which is it's unfortunate and it's a disservice.
Yes,
more and more providers, more and more people are becoming aware that this is a problem, and okay, now how do we address it?
Right.
Shortening the interviews, making very clear and concise questions.
Absolutely.
A lot of times, some of these questions are wordy, or the responses that these people are expecting back from that child is different from what a child with autism is able to give, or that child may not understand the words that are appropriate to use. I've had a lot of kids say, I'm really mad right now, but really they're sad.
Yes.
And for somebody who's not experienced or trained to deal with those types of responses may not understand or to interpret what that child is saying. So I think it's really just important to understand that when you work with a child with autism, that's one child with autism, because everybody's levels are so different.
Absolutely.
And what it looks like to one is not going to be the same to the other. So it's broadening our spectrum to understand how we can help the best way we can.
Exactly. As a counselor who works primarily with kids who have been victimized, I always try to take into account their learning styles, their abilities, because chronologically they might be 10, but they might be learning at a 5 or 6 year old level. That really has to be taken into consideration. There's a lot of different types of learning styles out there. And I think that maybe on the counseling end, we just need to learn how to be a little bit more flexible and kind of have it geared towards that specific individual.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm even thinking too, children with autism have perception difficulties.
Yes.
I've seen so many kiddos say different things, well, they stole my toy. Well, they didn't steal it. You weren't playing with it. They're using it and they're going to put it back. So I think it's important as providers to listen to what they're saying and really try to understand what they're communicating to us.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you might listen and you're going to interpret it incorrectly, but it's being aware. I think simply the awareness of this is a possibility is enough to get the ball rolling.
Okay, I think it's about time to wrap this up. I would like to thank you, Candace, for joining me. It's been a great experience, and you are full of a wealth of knowledge. I think we could have gone on for a lot longer, but
yes, we absolutely could have. Thank you so much for having me, Amy.
you are so welcome. I also need to thank our sponsors for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. These folks here on your screen are our key sponsors for our Sexual Assault Awareness Month activities: Mike Kelly Toyota, Radcliffe Law Office, and Somerset Trust Bank. I'd like to thank you all and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.